Hi loves, welcome back to the channel. Today's tutorial will be on how to make this beautiful piece. We have a jacket together with it, and it has a zip or a side slit. But what we have in the picture is a little bit different because what we have in the picture is longer, but mine is short. So this is my basic skirt. It's on a fold. Okay, so now I'm going to mark where I want my slit to be. You can decide to choose your left or your right. So I'm choosing this part, the left part of my skirt. That's where my slit is going to be, and I'm going to be working with my dart line. So this is a basic skirt. So guys, the first thing I did was to draft out my basic skirt. This is my waist, my hip, the full length of the skirt, even though we're going to be using it to form a gown. Okay, the next thing is to mark my dart line, and I used my nipple to nipple, which is the bust panel, 4 inches, okay, which is here. Then the dart intake is 0.75 on both sides. Now that is what I'm going to use to determine where my front slit is going to be. So from that dart now, I'm going to mark, since we have 4.5 here, since we have 4 inches here, it's still going to be the same 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches. Okay, then we're going to connect it using our rule. So this is what we have. Now we're going to slit this open, but before we slit this open, we are going to use it to cut out our back piece. All right, so I'm going to be using this to cut out my back piece now. So guys, at this point now, I've placed my front piece on top of a folded fabric to cut out my back piece. Okay, so note our back piece is going to be having a zip allowance, which is going to be running from the up down. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Then I'm going to slit it open. Then notch the upper part. Then I'll keep this aside. Then we'll now work on the front piece proper. So for our front piece now, I'm going to open up my paper. So after opening up my pattern paper, what I'm going to do is to slit this open. The line I marked for my slit, I'm going to slit it open till I get to the upper part of it. So now I have two pieces in front. Okay, so we're going to be placing this on our fabric to cut it out. All right, so let's do that quickly. I had to place my front piece on top of my fabric. The fabric is plain now. Okay, so now I added 1.5 inches from this point here. I added 1.5 inches. Reason is, one, because of the slit. Two, we're going to be having a zip at the front. On that our slit line, we're going to be having a zip on it. Okay, so that is why we have this. Now we're going to go ahead and cut this out. You can also decide to work with 2 inches or 1 inch, but I prefer working with 1.5 inches. All right. I'm also going to notch the center here. That is the center of the gown first, and also notch where our slit is joining from. Okay, I also go ahead and cut a lining piece for each of my pieces. this is for the other parts of the front. The same thing I did to the first one, that's the same thing I'm also doing here. Added 1.5 inches to it. Okay, for our allowance. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece out. So I also notch here where the joining is going to start from. Then shade the wrong side. Cut out the lining piece for it. So this is our half length for our piece. This is our chest line. This is our bust point, the under bust, the half length stroke waist. All right. So to get your chest line, what you do is you divide your bust measurement by 6, add 1.5 inches to it to get this. All right. So having done that, the next thing I did was to divide it by 2 to get the midpoint. Then I'm going to insert my shoulder measurements at that point, coming by 1/2 inch. All right, so this part now is, this is my 3 inches neck width, 1 inch shoulder slope, then connected the points. I'm going ahead to connect the dots together. I'm creating an armhole curve. Then the next thing I'm going to do here on the chest line is to insert the chest line, the bust measurements. Okay, then I'm going to curve it in. And this is what I have. So now I'm going to go ahead and insert my bust nipple points and my nipple to nipple measurements, the bust panel, which is 4 inches. So I marked it on the bust line, under bust and waist. All right, and I'm going to connect the 3 points together. I'm going to go ahead and divide my shoulder slope into 2 to get the midpoint, and this is where it is. Then from there I'll connect it to the bust line this way. This is what I have. What next to do is I'm going to come to this waist measurements, waistline. Now I'm going to mark 1.25 inches here, coming to this point and mark 1 inches. The same thing on the under bust, 1.25 here, 1 inch here. Okay, then I'll connect the dots using a rule. This is what I have. Okay, so now we're going to be connecting them to the bust points. So you make use of the curves part of your ruler to do this. And this is what I have. Okay, having done this, now the next thing to do is we are going to determine where we want our new chest line to be, our new start point line, because this is an off shoulder. So the easiest way to do is divide the difference between your bust and the under bust into 2. You have 1.5. So from the chest line you go up by 1.5 inches. All right, or from the shoulder line or the start point line you come down to 6.5, 7 inches, depending on how deep you want yours to be. So for this I'm working with 6.5 inches, which is here. So I'm going to draw a line there to state my new line. Okay, so having done this, now the next thing I'm going to do is to tighten the over bust. To do this, I'll mark 0.75 inches on both sides of the line, then connect it to the bust line. Okay, so this is what we have. All right, now we're going to go ahead to be making our alterations. So now we're going to mark the depth of our neck. If you want yours to be a sweetheart neck, what you have to do is just make a curve inward. If you want it to be on this straight through, it is totally fine. For this, I'm going to be making it a sweetheart neckline. So what I'm going to do is from here, I'll make my curve. So I want it to lie on the chest line, and this is what I have. So if you want it deeper, fine, you go ahead and make it deeper. All right. So now we're going to be adding back the the measurements we removed from this point. Like now here we have 1.5 inches. I'm going to be adding it back to this line. So I'll place my tape in a slant form. You can decide to place it. So the next thing I did was to add 1.5 inches here on a slant form. All right. So now I'm going to be connecting it using my rule. All right. From this point now, I'm going to connect them together, and this is what I have. So you can decide to mark it in a straight line. It's totally fine. Okay. So I'll go ahead and measure what I have here. I have 0.75 inches, and I'm going to add 1 inch for stitching allowance to it. Then at this point now, I also measure what I have here. I have 2.5 inches, so I'm going to first of all add my waist measurement, which is 7.5, plus the 2.5, plus 1 inch stitching allowance, then 2 inches actual seam allowance. All right. At this point too, I also add my 2 inches actual seam allowance. Then I'm going to connect them together. Okay, so this is what I have. Now we're going to be retracing our armhole. So I'm going to go ahead and retrace my new armhole, and this is what it is. This is the new armhole. Okay, now if you're working with an off, if you're working for an off shoulder that is going to have a sleeve, you go ahead and leave it this way. But because this is a sleeveless, all right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be making a curve into the new armhole. So this is what I'm going to do from this point now. I'll make a curve into the new armhole. So this is what we're going to have. So this part is going off. These areas I marked are all going off. So this is the yoke if you're working with a yoke. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it out now. So this is what it's looking like. This is what we have. So this is what our bustier will look like. All right, now we're going to go ahead and cut out for our back piece. So this is for my back piece, and this is my basic body. All right, so we have our zip allowance, which is 1.5 inches. We have our neck width, shoulder slope, and this is our chest line. So we're not going to be working with this upper part. From the chest line below, that's what we're working with. So the first thing I'm going to mark is my bust measurements, my waist measurements. Then I'll add my sewing allowance to them and connect the two. After I'm done joining this piece to my back piece, I'll now go ahead and stitch on my darts. Okay, so I'll cut this out now. So this is the piece I'm working with. So this is my front pieces. I've gone ahead to cut out my breast part for it. You can decide to use a ready-made bra cup. So now I'm going to join these three pieces together. I'm going to go ahead and join them together. So this is for the front piece, and I'm going to be attaching my zip to it. Remember, we have a notch area where our zip is going to fit in, where our slit is fitting in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place my zip this way. The hook or the this button is going to be at the bottom part. All right, so I'm going to place it this way. Go ahead and run a stitch on it. The same thing to the other side, like attach my zip the normal way you fix your zipper. At this point now, I'm done fixing my zip to my skirt, to the front piece. This is what we have. This is what it looks like. So you can open it up this way to have your slit. Okay, so anyhow you want to open it, the choice is totally yours. So now we're not going to be working on the upper part of this piece. So the next thing now is the cup, the bra cup. I've gone ahead to join them together, the front pieces, and this is what I have. The same thing I did here, I also did it for my lining. Okay, I went ahead and cut out the strap. So this is my strap. My strap is 14.5 inches long. So now this is my strap. My strap is 14.5 inches long. This is what I have. Now I'm going to be placing it on this piece. Okay, so I'm going to place it by the side here, few inches away from the joining of my bust here. All right, so let's measure and see what we have. About, let's say, 1.5 inches away from the bustier joining. Okay, so we're going to place it and also place our lining, then turn it out. The same thing we also do for this side of our bustier. So this is what we have. The next thing we're going to do is to turn this out this way. Then we're going to top stitch on the lining. Okay, reason is to hold our lining in place. So I'm going to go ahead and run a stitch on my lining. Like, this is the inside. I'm going to place it this way. Then I'm going to run a stitch on it till I get to this other part. So guys, the next thing we're going to be doing now is to join our skirt piece to our upper front piece. So this is what I have after turning it out my lining. This is what it looks like. Okay, so now I'm going to place it center to center, and this is my center piece, and this is the center piece of my skirt. I'm going to place it together and run a stitch on it to hold these two pieces together. All right, so guys, the next thing I'm going to be working on is the back upper piece, which is this. All right, so I'm going to be turning it down with my lining. This is the zipper area. Now note we are going to also be attaching our slits, our strap to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the strap in between the lining and my main fabric. Then I'm going to go ahead and stitch on them. So that's what I'm going to go ahead to do now. I'll do it for this and also repeat the same thing for this. Okay, so guys, at this point now I've gone ahead to also turn out my back piece, and I've joined it to the upper part of my back. Now the next thing I'm going ahead to do is I've marked my darts. I'm going to go ahead and stitch on it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do quickly now. So guys, I'm done with the darts. I've gone ahead to stitch on my dart intake. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to join my two back pieces together. Now we are going to be having a zipper at our back piece. All right, so I'm going to place it. So this is the zip I'm working with. I'm going to place it. So my zip is going to be stopping around this area, 1 inch. So because we're going to be having a slit in front, there is no need of a slit being at the back again. So I'm going to close it up. Okay, and moreover, this is a very mini gown. It's not long, it's a mini gown. So I'm going to go ahead and close this area up. Then I'll fix my zip to this part. When I'm done with it, I'll shape my dress. What we're going to be cutting is the upper part, the jacket, our jackets. All right, so I'm going to be working with 18 inches for my jacket, 18.5 inches, sorry. So that's what I'm going to be working with. So here now I'm going to insert my shoulder measurements, which is 7.5 inches. All right, then I'm coming down to 1 inch for my shoulder slope. Then the neck width is going to be 3 inches. I'll connect this neck width and shoulder slope together. Then the next thing I'm going to insert is my armhole measurement, which is my bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So this is where I'm going to insert my bust measurement. So I'm inserting it plus seam allowance. This is what I have. Then I'm going to mark my shoulder measurements again on this chest line. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to divide my armhole into 2 to get the midpoint. And this is the midpoint of what I have. From that point, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. So here I'm going to connect it to my shoulder slope. Then I'm going to mark my bust measurements here. Then make a curve. Create my armhole curve. So this is what I have. Then on the waistline, I'm going to go ahead and insert my waist measurements. But because this jacket is going to be free, there's no need of making like shaping the distance. So for example, now my waist is 7.5 inches. Add an extra 2 inches to it. Okay, so I just want it to be a free jacket. So I'm not working with my waist measurements. What I use is my bust measurements. I marked it down. Alright, so for my back neck depth is going to be 2 inches. Then I made a curve. So what I'm going to go ahead to do now is to cut out this piece. At this point now, I'm done cutting out my back piece, and I folded another fabric, placed my back piece on top of it. Okay, so if you look closely, you see I left some inches before placing my front piece. I have about 1.5 inches. But let's just make it 1 inch. So I have 1 inch before placing my back piece. Now I'm going to cut it out the same way what I have here. Okay. So this is what I'm going to go ahead to do now. Cutting this piece out. The next thing I'm cutting out now is the sleeve. So for the sleeve, for the length of the sleeve, I'm going to be working with 15 inches plus 2 inches extra for hemming and seam allowance. So now the next thing I marked is 4 inches. This is where I'm going to the biceps line where we insert our bust measurement. So what we're working with is 11 inches, including our seam allowance. Then we're also going to mark what we have at the end of our sleeve. Okay, so I have 12 inches plus 2 inches extra. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and connect the 2 points together. Then from here I'm going to make a curve towards the tip of the sleeve here. Then the next thing to do is to cut this piece out. So what I have here is one piece. I'm going to be using this to cut out. Alright guys, so for the front piece, I'm going to be working with 3.5 inches for the neck depth. Alright, so remember for the back piece, we worked to it. For the back piece, we worked with 2 inches, but for our front piece, you're going to be working with 3 inches deep. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. So this is what I have. The next thing I also went ahead to do was to cut out a lining for my pieces. So now I'm going to turn these pieces, both the front piece and the back piece, using my lining. So guys, at this point now, I've gone ahead to turn out my pieces with my lining. This is my front piece, this is my back piece, and this is my 2 front pieces. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to join the 2 shoulders together. That's what I'm going to go ahead to do quickly. So I'm done joining my two shoulders. Together, and this is what I have. Now I'm going to be attaching my sleeve to it. So I picked one of the sleeve, then this is the tip, the center. I'm going to place it on the center of the shoulder, then go ahead and fix it to the armhole area. Okay, so I'll do this here and also do it to this other side of the sleeve of the armhole. So guys, after joining my sleeves, the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and shape my dress. So I've already marked my shape line, so I'm going to go ahead and shape my dress. Okay, so that's what I'm going to go ahead to do now. You can decide to add few allowance. Maybe if your bust is 8.5, you can decide to add extra 1 inch or half an inch to it for ease. All right,